Good morning, my friends. I don't have a seat right now because Boo Kitty likes to be in charge of the show. She knows when we're doing a show, and this happens every time. It happens every Saturday as well. She knows we're gonna start the show, and she jumps up in the chair and she says, "Okay, I'm ready. Let's do the show." There's my beautiful princess here, my Princess Boo Kitty. Yeah, my pretty princess. Yeah, she's so spoiled. I don't know. Can you see her on the camera? You can kind of see her there, right? All right, Boo Kitty, I'm going to ask you to move. We're going to tilt the chair. Oh, come on, Boo. You can do it. Oh my gosh, she sticks like Velcro. Do you believe that? She's still in the chair. How are we going to start the show? How are we going to start the show, Boo? Oh my gosh. You're such a goofus. All right, let me take a corner of the chair. Huh. There we go. We're trying. We're trying. Dusty Chin, good to see you. Red Seth, Rotten Little Dead Girl, Tans Machina's out there. Glad to see you all joining us this morning. Sunday morning, recovery day. Hope you all have had a fun St. Patrick's Day weekend and all that, and glad to see you're all safe in here with us. Yeah, and we got Boo Kitty, who's going to tell you all of the good things that are coming up. No, actually, it's going to be Diana, our hostess with the mostesses, who's over here in your chat room patiently waiting for Boo to let her take the microphone and tell us all the good things that are coming up in the next few weeks here. Diana, would you mind picking that up for us while I pay attention to the cat?
Well, if you turn off your mic. Coming up this Wednesday, we have the MTV TV Artist Spotlight with Charming Disaster. And we just saw them live this past Sunday. It was amazing. And then this Saturday on twitch.tv/Addambombb, we have the Retro Rumpus. And then in 2 weeks, we have the Wicked Party. And then, of course, every Sunday here at 2 p.m. Eastern, we have Musically Minded.
That we do. Yeah, we've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. We just keep trying to do these things. We keep trying to do these things, and I'm so grateful that you're here doing them with us. Everybody, this goes out to everybody. We really appreciate your support. I especially appreciate your support. You can do the support thing on PayPal or Patreon, ADDAMBOMBB. That's me. Find me anywhere on the internet, that kind of thing. It helps keep the kittens spoiled, fed, and make sure we have lots of cookies for them. Shout out to Diana for sending the kittens cookies this week. That was pretty sweet. Lots of stuff coming up. Dusty Chin, I'm actually super glad that you are in the house today because let me background it a little bit. So the last couple of weeks, we've been talking pretty much entirely about the Technics 1200 turntable, and of course, as we so often do, relating how the analog technology from the roots of DJing relate to the digital technology and how we're doing things now. And I do want to kind of keep continuing on that conversation in a little different way today, and there's a couple of reasons why. The first reason is that after our conversation last week, Diana and I, as we were doing our post-mortem, she says, I'm not going to try to quote her, but in a nutshell, I tend to use a lot of shorthand, and maybe I'm not, getting enough into some of the terms and explaining the concepts quite deep enough, or there's some background information there that I might be just glossing over, kind of assuming that people know. and I was a little defensive about it first. I'm not going to lie and be like, well, I mean, I figure most people get what I'm talking about, kind of thing. And she's like, well, I get what you're talking about, and like the DJs will get what you're talking about, but the intention of the show from right from the beginning was to get a peek behind the curtains at DJing and understand some of the things that we do, why we make the decisions we make. And the terminology is a big part of that. Like every discipline and every medium and every career path, I would even say, have their own terminologies. Like as patients, Diana and I have joked a lot about, having to learn all kinds of medical abbreviations and terminology simply because the doctors talk to us like they talk to the other doctors, and so we have to get clarification and understand what they're talking about. Another thing that I do a lot is I will take terminology from other disciplines, and then use them as metaphors for some of the more artistic things that we do in DJing. And one of the things that I said to Diana earlier when we were talking about doing the show today was that I think that the more artistically, the deeper you go artistically with your DJing, the more technically deep you go. And so we end up kind of really using a lot of shorthand and a lot of terms. And sometimes the terms that we use mean different things in different contexts. And the one that Diana had said specifically was that was cueing. She's like, you talk about cue a lot, and I don't think maybe everybody is really understanding where you're going with that, because cueing, when you talk about cue, it could be, your cue channel, it could be about your program and your cue, it could be about actually queuing up the song and that kind of thing. So the other reason that I want to talk about that stuff today, I had been thinking that it would be kind of cool to, since we were talking about the turntables over the last couple of weeks, I thought it would be cool to talk a bit about the mixer, which is, the heart of what we do. And so I thought it'd be kind of cool to go through the signal path a little bit. And DJ Frantic, I don't know if he's in the chat with us yet here, but Frantic messaged me over on the Facebook and was asking me just a question about, the aux channel and kind of like, how do you use that? How does it work? Kind of thing. And I kind of ended up going into a diatribe about, like the different signal strengths and the signal path through the mixer and all that kind of shit. And I was like, yeah, I should probably talk about that stuff on the show, and we can go over the mixer a little bit, and talk about the layouts. What makes every mixer kind of the same, and maybe a few of the differences as well. Some of the parts and stuff. Sorry, the cat is behind me, and I'm trying not to crush her. Like, she really loves to do the shows with us. She really does. The other one goes and hides because, like, I don't know, he doesn't like when I pick him up. He's very sharp. They're both very sharp. So I thought it'd be kind of fun. Red Seth says Q C U E or Q Q U E U E, and now that's funny because homonyms, right? Like, what the hell am I talking about? Most of the time I'm talking about the C-U-E version, although sometimes I might be talking about having songs in the queue, because like it's, in my prepare crate or whatever, and I'll say, like somebody will be like, oh, do you have this? And I'll be like, yeah, I'll get it in the queue, meaning Q-U-E-U-E. But yeah, I could just as easily say, yeah, I'll get it in the prep crate, And here I am even saying like, what, you know, the prep crate, and like, if you're not a DJ using Serato, you're like, what the hell is the prep crate? It's where we keep our ideas handy. um, so let's see where to begin. Should I just start with the word cue? CUE? What do you think, Diana? Yeah, okay. She says sure up in the chat room. Of course, taking care of you in the chat room. Cue the kitty soft paws. Aw. Yeah. Well, you know, as Diana often says, Boo's always working on her scratching. She's got a hell of a personality behind the decks. You've seen her. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about QUE. Q. When we talk about queuing up a song, we're talking about setting the beginning point, or a cue point, I should say. A cue. Let's talk about even why we call it a cue point. So when we're talking about queuing a song, we're talking about finding the part of the song that we want to start playing it at, and that's regardless of format. Of course, when we're talking about records, we will listen to it in the cue channel. I'll get to it, I promise. And we will find the spot that we want to start so that we can release the record and let it begin. That's our cue point. On the more modern, digital DJing stuff, CDJs and upward, we set a cue point at that so that we can hit the button and it will start where we want it to. Of course, cue point is a term that you will find often in music in general. It's like not even just DJing, queuing, cue points, all that kind of stuff. It comes up a lot, when you're talking about sequencing and stuff too. So it's a good thing to know. So your cue point is the place that you're setting your record to begin, your song to begin. The act of queuing is setting that point, getting it into your headphones. And when we're talking about queuing, we're also talking about when we're setting our beat match, like how we're going to mix it. If we're beat matching the thing, we're listening to it in the cue channel. Again, I'll get there. And we're setting the tempo. We're setting a cue point. We're setting our tempo adjustments. We're setting our loop. If we're looping, we're doing all of that stuff in the cue channel, and we call it queuing. It's the act of preparing to play the next track in your set. Let's get on to the cue channel, because that's how we do it. Is we do it all in the headphones, which you will often hear me refer to as the cans, because it's an old radio term, like not even radio, FM radio, but like military radio and like shortwave and that kind of stuff. They'd call them the cans, and the joke there is that the operator has a short between the cans, right? If something's not working right, or if they're crazy, they have a short. So I'm a very good DJ, but I have a short between the cans, right? Because it's in my brain. Anyway, so yeah, we do all the queuing in the headphone, and the audience can't hear it. That's like the really important thing there, is that the audience doesn't hear us mucking about and spinning the record back and forth and, having it sound like suck ass until we get it right. Okay. And so what we're doing is we are sending it through a path in the mixer that sends the cue channel only to the headphones, not to the output. So the output we call the program channel, and that's what the audience is hearing, is the program, which is often abbreviated PGM, but nobody says, they say program. and the Q channel, which the audience does not hear. And we have, most of the time on the mixer, we have a way to blend that. On this particular mixer, on the Rain mixer, it's program 1 and program 2 as opposed to program and Q. But a lot of times on the mixer, like on this one, where it's a place where you can't see it on the camera because it's on the front of the thing, and it's program on one side and Q on the other, and that allows you to hear both things going on in the headphone at the same time. Here it is on the Rain, right here. The Rain mixer is going to be very handy for my oh yeah, okay, no, Dusty Chin. I am so glad that we decided to run down this. So good instincts, Diana, because this was Diana's thing that she thought I should talk about. So good instincts, Diana. Dusty Chin says, naive question, you are doing this while the current track is playing, yes? And the answer is yes. And Dusty Chin then says, you just answered my other naive question, why are DJs on and off with the headphones? And that is exactly why, because, well, there's another thing there, and I can get a little finer. I'll get to a little finer point with that. Well, let me finish talking about the Q channel first, and then I will get to that finer point. So as I was saying, we have the ability to blend in our headphones between the program channel that the audience is hearing and the Q channel that only we can hear. And so what we are doing at that time is preparing how we are going to mix the channel, the song that we are queuing in the, the act of queuing, to mix with the program channel. And of course, going back and forth and how much it blends helps us to hear, like sometimes we want to hear the Q channel a little bit more louder in the headphones, so to speak, more prominently in the mix, and sometimes we want to hear the program more prominently in the mix. And I think it's important to make this clear that it has nothing to do with what the actual mix is going to come out sounding like, right? Because by blending it that way, it's like, the gain value, the signal strength, the volume, so to speak, of the song that you're playing, and the volume, of the song that you're queuing, are not relative. Then it's, you're controlling it by using the blend here. So sometimes, you don't want to trick yourself into thinking that the thing that you're bringing in is going to be super loud. So that's why you go back over to the program side and you see, like, kind of where does it hit that point where I can hear both of them and it sounds, like meshed well. And then you can make it louder so that you can fine tune it during your mix, while you're in the actual act of mixing. So why are we on and off with the headphones all the time? We're on the headphones because we're queuing, and we're off the headphones because we're listening to the room. And we're also, like, when you're actually DJing, you're always trying to be a few steps ahead in your mind. We've talked about this before about, wanting to have a few different options of places that you can go depending on, the mood of the room or how it feels. And, that's the ephemeral stuff. And, so a lot of times you'll see, during my shows or whatever, where, like, I'll have the mix going in Q, and I'll begin to start bringing it in, and then I, like, flip the thing over on my chest and I turn off the Q selection button. There's a Q selection button. That's what sends the Q track to the Q channel well, through the Q channel. It turns on the Q channel. How's that? So that we can hear it in the headphones. That's the one that's going into Q. So you can have the program channel in Q, but then you're just hearing the same thing in both channels. So I will start the mix while I'm in the Q channel on the headphones, but then I start bringing it in to a point where I'm going to start hearing it on the PA, because there is a fair amount of space down here where it's like it's too quiet for the audience to hear it, but you've got it louder in your Q channel over here so you can hear where it is compared to what you're playing, right? But then there's a point at which the audience is going to be able to hear it. And so what I do is I flip my headphone off and I turn off the Q channel so that I hear it in the monitor the way that the audience is going to hear it on the dance floor. And I do it the same way, of course, when I'm on Twitch and all that too, because I have the monitor over here in-house and it's got a pretty good woofer on there, subwoofer on there, so I can get a real good sense of what the actual air pressure is coming through a speaker, so that I know it sounds better coming out of your laptops that have no fucking sub in them either. But it'll sound smooth across all the frequencies. Oh, okay, I thought there was another. Red Seth says, plus you can ignore drunk requests with headphones on. Yeah, you know what we call that? We call that giving you the finger. Like, hold on, I'm mixing. That's giving you the finger. But yeah, and then drunk people make requests and we go, okay, cool. Every DJ has different ways of handling bad requests. Like we could probably do a whole show just on that. All right, so moving right along. That's the whole reason that we are on and off with the headphones, because we can listen to it in the Q channel. And it, the volumes, like I said, it's not what you're hearing going through the program, unless you crank it all the way over to program, which is a way that you can do it. If you're in a really loud room and you don't have good monitoring and it's like really echoey or whatever, sometimes like at Ex Mortis over at the Middle East downstairs, the DJ booth is on the far side of the room over by the sound booth. On the far side of the room from the stage where all the PA is, all the speakers are, and that room used to be like a 9-pin bowling alley or something. So it's quite a lot of delay. Delay is the distance between the source and the ear, so it's quite a lot of delay. And so when I'm in that room, I will often execute the mix by starting it in Q and then flipping it over to program, and then executing the mix entirely in the headphones, because the monitoring situation is much more difficult in that room. But that's kind of the nutshell, I think, on Q, CUE, and some of the different things that we're talking about. So queuing. Once again, just to break it down into a few different terms, queuing, the act of queuing is finding the place that you want your record to start, and all of the things that you're doing in terms of preparing your mix when you don't want the audience to hear it. So it's going to be like setting up your beat matches and that kind of thing. Setting up your equalization, which we'll talk about in a minute, that kind of stuff as well. Oh, there goes Boo. I get my chair back. Oh, big stretch for a little cat. She's so cute. She's a chubby cat. She's not that little. So yes, queuing is anything that happens in the headphone that the audience can't hear, basically. A cue point is the point at which you intend to start the record, start the song. The cue channel is the signal path that carries the sound to your headphones, and only to your headphones, and does not go through the main output of the mixer, which is another thing we'll get to, the main out or the master output of the mixer. Same thing, different words. And is that all of it? Yeah. Actually, when we were talking about turntables, a couple of times it came up, that mark on the record, that piece of tape on the bottom of my clear records, so that that's all part of, cueing, right? That's how, I'm setting my cue point with the record, is I'm setting it where I want it relative to my clock, my imaginary clock. And then that way, I know where the beginning of the song is, and I can, if it goes around a few times, I can just rewind it that number of times, and it will be right there at the top of my clock again, like it is with the marker on the controller here, which I think you can see that well enough on the camera here. So yeah, cueing. That's the nutshell on cueing, and I'm going to say again, it is something I've just been kind of taking for granted for the last 14 weeks or whatever it is. What is this, show 14? I know we have a handful of DJs that are out there watching the show. Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy it as well. And so I do kind of make some assumptions. And I do think, I do think it's good to get down to the 101s a little bit. So thank you, Diana, for suggesting that. And so moving right along, Frantic asked me about the auxiliary channel. He kind of wanted to know what the aux channel does, AUX, short for auxiliary. He wanted to know, like, what will I use this for? How does that work? Kind of thing. And so that opens up a few different facets of conversation on its own. I'm gonna pop the mixer up here real quick. And instead of going straight to the auxiliary channel, we're going to talk about the ins and outs, if you will, of a mixer. Usually you're going to find all that stuff on the back of the mixer. Oh, here comes Boo. You know what's going to happen is I'm going to lean forward to show you all the back of this mixer, and Boo is going to jump up into my pilot seat here. All right, so I'm going to lean up. I'm going to show you the back of the mixer here. I'm going to try to point to stuff the best I can. And then I'm going to relate that to the stuff that's on the front of the mixer the best I can. So bear with me as we do this. Here we go. Alrighty. With the microphone in my armpit, can I lean that there? I need to go that way. All right. Yes, we're good at this. Oh, for crying out loud. It's kind of heavy. Like, I need to hold it back a little bit and do it this way. All right. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the main output or the master output. There. And what you are seeing there is that particular connector type is called an XLR. X stands for ground, L stands for left, and R stands for right. It is a balanced output. I know, pin that one, because that's a term that I'm going to have to get to. It's a balanced output. It looks, even though it's a hole, that's actually the male connector. That's the male side of the connector, which, you can tell because it has the 3 pins there as opposed to 3 little holes, which would be the female side of the connector, or the jack. Speaking of jacks, over here we've got booth outputs. Right? And that's a 1/4" jack. And it says above it there, it says balanced as opposed to unbalanced. As I said, the XLR connection is balanced. This has a balanced 1/4" output. The outputs next to it over here are all unbalanced. But they serve a specific purpose, which is an effects loop, which I'm only going to gloss over very, very briefly because we don't use these a lot, especially when we're talking about digital DJing where the effects are built into the software sort of thing. This gives you the ability to send the signal left and right out to an effects processor and then back in. So if you want reverbs or digital delays or phasing and flanging and all of those kind of effects, I know effects, it could be a whole nother conversation. But that's what you would do there, and there is a knob on here that allows you to blend the amount of effect on each channel. Up here, all of this stuff up here is RCA connectors. And we have several different options here. We have outputs for every channel on here, and we have the auxiliary in and out, and that's the thing that that Frantic was asking me about. So we'll get to that one specifically. These are all inputs here for each channel, so that if I wanted to plug in a turntable, I would plug the outputs from the turntable into the input of the channel that I'm going to select for the signal path to run down. We'll talk about channels in a minute. And then I would attach the ground wires to these little posts here if I didn't have self-grounding turntables, which we talked about in the previous weeks. But each of these is an input. There are 4 channels of input. On this mixer, there are 2 channels of control, and so you select which input the signal is going to up at the top with the knob there. And on different mixers, it'll do things a little bit different ways. Oh, Jesus. I gotta put that down for a minute. My spine is not what it used to be. Hello, Labyrinth. Oh, Dusty Chin, that's a good question. I'm going to put a pin on that for a moment, and then we'll get to that, because that is a pretty important consideration. And I know the audience that's listening is like, what the hell are you talking about? But we'll read it off in a minute there. So to talk real quick about Frantic's question, the auxiliary input and output give you different options to plug something else into your mixer, like a CD deck, or back in the day maybe a cassette deck, and of course on each channel you can plug in any of those things as well, but you need to set the dip switches as to whether or not it's going to be line or phono input, because they have different signal strengths, as do each of the outputs on this mixer. And I'm going to gloss over the what I should probably do is we'll pick up another time and talk about cables and the different signal strengths and the different ways that they carry signal. Maybe we'll get to it a little bit further as we go along today. But to kind of keep things to the mixer, when you plug in a source, that's anything that goes into the channel, we're going to call that a source. So it could be a turntable, could be a CD player, could be a cassette player, it could be the input source from your laptop, from your DJ software. Pardon me, I need a moment to catch my breath. Okay. When it's your laptop that is the source, it's usually going through the USB. But it is, again, everything that we do here in the digital world is related to what we do in the analog world. And so the signal path works in that same way. The first thing that it's going to go through is the gain. The gain is a variable resistance. It's a potentiometer that works as a variable resistor. And so that is, I want you to think about signal as like a bunch of channels, of like canals and locks, right, where they raise and lower the boats in the locks by matching the water levels and that kind of thing. Like think about signal like a flowing stream, and all of the things that happen to it, all of the knobs that we have here do something to it along the way. Gain is how much pressure that water has. It's how much fucking water are you letting through. It's basically volume, but I don't want to call it volume. Volume is really technically like when the sound is in the air, and how it relates to your ear and to how your brain processes sound. We're talking about signal strength at this point, and I think that is kind of an important distinction, that that signal and volume aren't the same thing, but that the things that we do to the signal affect how we perceive it when it comes out of the speakers, and we perceive it as volume, right? Or as loudness. So the gain is how much signal strength goes through. And what we do is we want to make sure that we have the gain balanced so that it's not so much water that it's overflowing the sides, right? Because that's, that's what we would call redlining. When the signal strength is too strong and starts to distort, because what's actually happening is that the signal is so strong that it exceeds the capability of the speaker, essentially, and so the speaker kind of freezes there, and that's what causes that sound of distortion. It's all happening many times a second. But that's what that overall sound of distortion is coming from, is that the signal itself is too strong, and it's making the speaker cone freeze in tiny increments and not rebound the way that it should, not pump the way that it should, push and pull. Push, pull. When you're looking at a waveform, push, pull. I know, it's a lot. But that's why we do Musically Minded, and we can always talk about these things in more detail as we go along in future weeks. First thing that we hit, as I said, is the gain knob, and that determines how much water is flowing in your river. And what you want is a very nice optimal flow that gives you no distortion, but good loudness. And we do use the metering for that, and we use our ears for that, because, like, if we hear that it's distorting, well, it's distorting. If we hear that it doesn't have enough signal strength in there compared to, especially if we're playing it next to something else, then we know we need to raise the gain. And we have input meters. That's what all these like fancy lights up things are on each channel. There's a channel, by the way, each channel on the mixer, and they're all identical and they all work the same, and it's like the same thing on every mixer, but sometimes things are in slightly different places, but it all works the same. We have the input monitor on each channel, and that lights up, and it gives us a good approximation of what our signal strength is, that will be going to the output channel, the master out, and we have a pair of strips here that give us the left and right information on how strong the signal is going out of the mixer, to the, amplifiers and whatnot afterwards. So first thing is the gain. Then the thing that we see is a few knobs here that are the equalizers. We shorthand that as EQs. We talk about EQing. The process of EQing is changing what the equalization of the input signal is the audio equalization. So we have 3 different bands on this mixer. Sometimes you'll see 4. Sometimes you'll see them done in different. There are different types of equalizers. I am not going to get into that right now because it's not really pertinent to what we're doing with DJing. It's much more pertinent when you're talking about production and live mixing and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't matter for this. What we have is 3 bands of EQ: high, medium, and low, going from top to bottom, high, medium, low. And you'll hear us saying a lot, the DJ is saying a lot, like don't boost, cut. So we use this a lot for cutting the EQs. If I want the kick drums to come out and the sub bass, I turn the bass all the way down. I do this all the time when I'm beat matching. Sometimes something will have a lot of sound filling out the high end, and the thing that I'm mixing into doesn't. So I'll cut the EQs back on the highs. Sometimes maybe I want something to stand out a little more in the middle, and so I'll give the mids just a little bit of boost. Or maybe I want the other stuff around. I don't want the synth line or something to stand out so much, so I'll turn it down a little bit. That's how we affect the sort of up and down. I think in our river, I would call it the sort of up and down. Like, like we cut off the bass or we cut off the treble. And so we're sort of scooping out that section that we don't want in the beginning of our mix. And, and then of course, as we execute the mix, we bring it all back to 0 in the EQs. And then you're listening to the recording as it's meant to be listened to. Again, I like to think of the gain as like how much water is going into our channel, our canal here. And the EQ is it's like a depth thing, but when you cut off the bottom, it actually makes it shallower this way, with the top staying the same. And when you cut off the top, it makes it shallower this way with the bottom staying the same. Does that make sense? And then anything in the middle is like Moses parting the fucking Red Sea or something. I don't have a good analogy for that. Fuck me. The next thing that we have down here on this mixer is a filter. Now that's not something you might see on all the old DJ mixers. I'm going to pull this one up again. There's no filter button on. There's no filter knob on this one. There's not a filter built into this mixer. This is an analog mixer. This is a digital filter. It's built into the digital mixer, and it's controlling a digital effect in the software. But it is, again, like all things that we do digitally, based on analog hardware. So I do have a mixer upstairs, an old Allen and Heath mixer, and that has a high pass and low pass filter built into the mixer. It operates in a slightly different way. In this case, the middle means there's no filter applied at all, and you're listening to the recording the way it was intended. If you turn it back from 0 from the middle position, it's cutting off the high end. So instead of full volume like this, it's going down like this, right? So you're only hearing the low frequencies. And if you turn it the other way, it cuts out all of those. You're only hearing the high frequencies. And I'm using pitch to do that, and that's not how it works at all. It doesn't change the pitch at all. What it is it's cutting off frequencies. It's working like an equalizer, but it is a high pass cutoff or a low pass cutoff, depending on the direction that you're going with. Low pass cutoff if you just want the highs, high pass cutoff if you just want the lows. That makes sense, right? It also has what we call a notch in it. Like when we're using parametric EQs, God, there I go into another thing. It has a notch in it, and it raises a little part of the equalizer of the equalization as well, and so that's what gives it that sound. So like we can be like, so that's the knob that does that for us. That's the knob that goes right. It's pretty cool, right? And it's a great effect when you're beat matching, because you can cut off filters and sweep it in, and make it sound like the songs are sweeping together and that kind of stuff. Very, very handy little tool. You use it all the time. It's really nice to have it right there on the mixer, which is why I liked the Allen and Heath mixer. I like the Rain mixer that I have down here. The Rain mixer that I have down here is like, it's my battle machine. That's what I set up with the turntables, and like I'm not fucking with the filters and stuff like that. I'm doing it entirely on the EQs there. That's like the stripped down sort of no bells, no whistles, just fucking DJing with this mixer. And I've done some modifications on it as well, to make it a more specifically tuned performance machine. But that's another conversation for another time. Let's see. Oh my gosh, is it 2:50 already? 50 minutes, and I haven't even got. And yes, Tans Machina, I can answer that question for you in a moment as well. I haven't even finished getting through the whole channel yet. There's a button over here, which is the Q button. It sends the signal to the Q channel like we were talking about before. This over here is a selector switch. That's the input switch. We were talking about that with the different inputs on the other mixer, how on that mixer it's on the top of the channel. There's a knob that selects which input channel it's coming through, and there's one here that does the same thing. So on this particular one, because it is a Serato controller, it has PC, which means the channel is coming in from the laptop. It has mic 2, which means that I can plug a microphone into another input that's on the back for a second microphone, and then it's controlling that. And then I have the line selector. So if I were running a line level signal into it, which would be your CDs, your tape player, I could do that as well. And on this machine, actually, you can hook up a turntable to it as well, and use the line as your throughput for that as well. The input has a different gain structure, but this particular machine compensates for it. Why am I ringy ding? And did we lose Diana? Oh gosh. Skype just kills this thing, doesn't it? Diana, are you with us? Can you hear me right now? I think we've lost Diana, so I'm going to hang up over here, and we're going to try to get her reconnected for the end of the show. Okay, I think what we're going to have to do is wait for her to reconnect and call me back. Oh, there we go. Hey, hey, it's the return of Diana. All right, Diana, I'm going to turn off my microphone real quick, and I'm actually going to ask you which one should we do first? Should we do Tans Machina's question real quick, or should we pop back up to what Dusty Chin was asking about?
Yes. Uh, what about tips for? Oh, you may have to do this without me.
Looks like we're having some technical difficulties there, huh? Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right. Tans Machina says, what about tips for cleaning tin and mud?
Uh-huh. And those words in quotes, tin and mud. What do we mean by tin and mud? By tin, we mean it's like peaky and makes our ear go, ow, right? And mud, it means that everything sounds kind of muffled, like you got a mouthful of marbles, right? And my tips for that is that it's all in the equalizers there. um, Sometimes tracks are a little tinny, and sometimes tracks are a little muddy on their own, and we use the EQs to clean that up a little bit. If it's tinny, you're going to want to take out a little bit of the highs and possibly a little bit of the mids. And if it's and it might require you to boost the bass EQ a little bit to kind of get that balance back to it so that it's, kind of consistent with the other stuff that you're playing. If it's muddy, you're usually taking bass out and adding highs and possibly mids as well. Again, to get it to sound consistent next to the other stuff. When you're actually mixing two tracks together, to keep it from getting muddy, you swap the EQs during your mix, during your beat match, so that the way I do it a lot is like I'll have the bass EQ cut out in the one that I'm cueing, the one that I'm bringing in, and the EQ normal on the program channel. And then, I'll count it off. You're counting your bars, 1, 2, 3, 4. And, usually your phrases are sitting in that like 16 beats, 4 bars, or maybe 32, 8 bars. And so I'm kind of just counting it in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And I turn it over on the measure that marks that phrase, that all important one beat. We've talked about it before. The one beat that begins the phrase, the musical passage there to come over the next 4 or 8 bars. And that's how I get the mud out of my mixes. And I do the same thing to get the tinniness out of the mixes. Like I said, sometimes something has a lot of high frequency sounds, and so you want to cut that back a little bit so that it's not creating an overlapping frequency clash or something that makes the, it's like so a wave plus a wave always equals a wave, and we're mixing sound waves together, so you're either amplifying frequencies or possibly canceling them, which you really don't want to do. But A wave plus a wave is always a wave, and it changes when you add two waves together. It changes the shape, and so that's why I'm taking the headphone off to listen to what it sounds like in the room, because it might sound nice and clean in the headphone, but then when I listen to it in the room, I'm like, oh, boomy, or as muddy in the bass, or oh shit, there's like a really weird frequency in that, um, that's peaking because it's mixing with another frequency perhaps, or just because, like I said, sometimes something has a lot more sound going on in the high end, and the thing that you have coming in has less sound, and you just want the sort of cohesion there. So it's like you take it down during your mix, and then you bring it in so that it's not like a speed bump to the ear, like it's not a surprise to the listening ear. So that's the quick rundown on that. And Dusty Chin was asking something up a little bit higher in the chat. Would you kindly read that out for me, Diana?
Let's see here. It seems like there are a lot of subtle but collectively important actions that you affect to produce the product that the audience hears. It seems in my perception that without experience and skill, the product would be bad. True? Love to hear a sample of bad product for comparison.
Um, you know what I think we probably ought to do is, would you all mind if we pick that up next week, and I can be a little more prepared to throw something on the decks here, and maybe do some audio examples on that, and Diana, you'll keep the note on that, and we can kind of get that going in next week's show. Like I really, needless to say, I don't want to I don't want to use like another DJ as an example, or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, maybe the things that I'm looking for when I'm mixing, and how do I say this? Yeah, I mean, I can do that. I'll do that. I'll get myself ready to do some audio examples next week, and show you some examples of stuff like mixing off phrase, not knowing where your one is, kind of thing, or like train wrecking, not having the tempos together, like how they drift. Um, you know, uh, maybe some key clashing, maybe, some things that, like, this is an example of where I would use EQ, and this is why, because it sounds bad when you don't, kind of things. Yeah. You call it shit getting weird. I like that, Dusty Chin. Yeah, that sounds like a good one. Um, uh, I don't know how to say your name, MXO Reed, Mixo Reed. Um, but yeah, I do think that sounds like an awesome topic and demonstration. And thank you, Dusty Chin, for I guess that's what we'll do next week for the show, because we're getting right up to the edge on this one. Um, I feel like we did a pretty good job getting down into the mixer here. The one last thing that I didn't talk about yet is the crossfader. What that does is it blends between the track that you're playing and the track that you're mixing. If it's all the way over here, it's this track. If it's all the way over here, it's that track. And it is the equivalent of doing a crossfade done without using a crossfader. You would do it on the up faders. That's what these are, the up faders. By essentially making an X with your mix, so one goes up while the other goes down. And that's what your crossfader does. You leave them both at full, and your crossfader goes across and does exactly what it would be if you started at nothing on one side and 100% on the other, and then switch that in like an X. And the crossfader will have different curve settings. And one of those curve settings you'll see is a full crossfade that looks like an X. And then when we're doing scratching and stuff, it looks like this, where there's like no crossfade at all. It's just like a bracket. And that's so that the very close, we call it a point, so that as soon as it comes off the post, as soon as it reaches the cut point on the fader, the other channel is in 100%. And that's what we use for scratching and turntablism and very short and juggling, right, where you're doing very short passages back and forth between a breakbeat or something like that. It's one of the tools that we have. And let's see, is there anything else on the mixer that I should go over? Okay. This is the next thing is once it's gone through all of that, it's gone through the channel, it gets to here, to the up fader and to the crossfader. It goes to the master output. That's what goes to your amplifier and your speakers. And so there's no further manipulation of the sound after that, unless you are plugging into an external mixer, which I happen to be in this case, but I'm not changing anything over here. It's really just so that I have a microphone input and multiple inputs. So like when Diana's here, I can have a couple of mics going and not be using up a channel on this mixer, that kind of thing. It's really like it's not a necessary thing at all, and I don't bring it when I'm gigging because I just use the microphone through the controller. I do bring it when I'm doing the witch's ball and stuff, because I need to have wireless microphones to the stage that I can turn off and turn on right at my table. And the audio mixer over here has a mute button for each channel, so that I can turn the microphone off. Now you can hear me. See, you couldn't hear me. That's because I was hitting the mute button there. Let's see. Am I forgetting anything else about the mixer? I think that's pretty good coverage. Of course, if you do have any questions, feel free to let me know. You can drop me a line on the social media. I check Facebook Messenger. It's pretty easy to find my email address and stuff too on Facebook. It's right there. And Patreon, right? Patreon.com/ADDAMBOMBB. Ask me questions there. I don't mind. I'll answer them the best I can. And maybe we'll end up talking about it here on Musically Minded, because that seems to happen a lot. We talk about some things and we go, hey, that'd be a cool thing to talk about on Musically Minded. But I think Dusty Chin has definitely set us up for next week's show, and it actually kind of fits into something else that we were talking about, the construction of mixing and remixing. And I think that all plays very nicely into what we'll do next week, when we do some audio examples of hopefully good mixing, and some audio examples of what to avoid if you want if you want good mixing. Because yes, there are an awful lot of subtle reasons that we do the things, and there's a lot of ways that we manipulate it so that we can get things that aren't meant to go together to come together in a musically minded way. And I think that's a pretty good way to close out this particular episode. I am going to ask your hostess with the mostess to read out all the good things that are coming up again while I take a sip of my coffee, and then we shall say goodbye.
Well, of course, please join us every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Musically Minded. And then on Wednesday on twitch.tv/MTVTV. This week, March 22nd, we have the Artist Spotlight with Charming Disaster. And then this coming Saturday on twitch.tv/Addambombb, ADDAMBOMBB, we have the Retro Rumpus at 8 p.m. Eastern.
That we do. So of course we're here every Saturday night. We've got Retro Rumpus next week. We've got the Wicked Party the week after that. It'll be Spooky Spins again the week after that. 4 weeks from now, Diana, on April 15th, something cool is happening. Would you please tell us about that one?
On April 15th, we are part of DJ Moan's fundraiser for Alzheimer's awareness. And that'll be at 9 Arch, but it's all the way from April 13th through the 17th. So it's a whole weekend of raising funds and awareness.
Pretty badass. And we'll be on at the same bat time and same bat channel as usual, 8 o'clock Eastern. And Moans and the gang will be raiding into us at 9 o'clock, and then at 10 o'clock we are going to raid to DJ Loki, my dear friend and partner in crime, and the best damn tag team DJ I have ever had the opportunity to teach and to work with. Fantastic fucking DJ, and you should be following official DJ Loki on Twitch anyway. If you're not, rectify that at your earliest convenience. On that note, I'm going to say thank you so much, everyone, for showing up and joining us for the conversation today. Thank you so much for your support. It means everything. I'm so loving the idea that we're going to go forward with what Dusty Chin was, pardon me, talking about up there. We'll go ahead and we'll do some audio examples next week and get a little further into the nitty gritty of mixing. Thank you again, DJD42, Diana, for moderating everything but my drinking on the shows that we do all the time. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much and goodbye. I'm going to flip us over to the theme, and then we'll raid MTV TV. Whereas Diana mentioned you should join us on Wednesday for the Artist Spotlight with Charming Disaster, because they really are so fucking charming. All right, thank you again. Goodbye, my friends. We love you very, very much, and we will see you again real soon.